Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Ancient Mysteries Unearthed. I'm your host, Chris Noble, and I'm so excited today to be bringing a good friend of mine and an amazing researcher, entrepreneur, and multi-talented individual. Neil Gaur is actually a friend that I met recently in Mexico on my travels and also on his travels because he travels all around the world researching amazing things, extra dimensional things, conscious things, spiritual ideas, esoteric ideas, and of course, more appropriately for today on Ancient Mysteries Unearthed, ancient civilizations. We're going to be talking about a whole bunch of things, but focusing mostly around Egypt, ancient Egypt, the time cycles of Egypt, the Yuga cycles, also how old is Egypt, who were the Egyptians, and all of the incredible mysteries and technology, lost technology that we know of from the ancient times, specifically in Egypt. So we've got an amazing episode for you today. I'll just quickly give you guys a bit of a background and a bio on Neil, and then, of course, we'll bring him in here. So, Neil Gaur is the founder of Portal to Ascension. Now, Portal to Ascension is an amazing website. I've signed up to it where you can sign up for free to this newsletter and get a whole ton, hours and hours and hours and hours of content from presenters that if you're into this area of alternative history, you've absolutely heard of some of these people. You could just look down on his speaker list and it's an incredible plethora of information. So I highly recommend you guys checking out Portal to Ascension, Neil's website. Of course, that'll all be in the description and the details of the show notes of the show. Check them out. Neil has been doing this with this company since 2008, and they host a wide range of presenters on a variety of topics, such as the origins of humanity, the existence of extraterrestrial life, exposing hidden truths, and exploring the nature of reality. Neil travels the world facilitating gatherings and filming documentaries that are intended to empower the individual to reclaim their sovereignty and awaken their full potential. Neil also operates an online platform that creates and facilitates about 110 conferences and workshops a year. Wow, that is incredible. And we're going to be, of course, talking about some of the things that Neil's got coming up this year that you guys can check out, because I think you'll be really, really interested. We know with Portal to Ascension, they've worked with over 3,000 presenters, researchers, spiritualists, scientists, consciousness, explorers, light workers, and more. And now Neil, as his own self, of course, is a philosopher. He's a historian, a really amazing researcher, and a spoken word artist. And actually, that's how I met Neil, was through a performance together with my music and his amazing spoken word and rap, conscious rap, as I like to call it, because Neil raps about really amazing topics like consciousness, like past lives, ancient civilizations, and so many amazing things. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the podcast, Neil Gaur. Neil, how are you doing today, buddy?
Doing good, brother. So good to be here with you. And I'm just excited to be here talking about this because I'm into everything, but ancient history is my favorite topic, and prehistory, the history before what we've been told, is something that just like piques my curiosity.
Well, and that's how we connected. For those watching and listening here, I met Neil in Mexico. We were going to do a show from a mutual friend that was organizing it. And as we were in rehearsal together, I learned about Neil's actual day-to-day business with Portal to Ascension, and my jaw dropped, and I couldn't believe that somebody who's so into this niche of alternative history and, of course, consciousness and everything else was doing a show with me. I thought it was the most funniest synchronicity, and I'm so
Yeah,
glad that we connected. And it was a great show. You're an amazing performer. I'm excited to do more of that. But of course, today we're going to dive deep into your amazing knowledge and research on Egypt and other things.
definitely. Yeah, and the feeling's 100% mutual, brother. I really appreciate all the overlaps and connection that we have.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll continue to be working together this year as well on some of the expeditions. For those again watching and listening, Neil has an amazing trip to Egypt, which we will give more details about, of course, in the show notes. You guys can check that out. That's happening in September of this year, 2023. September 6th, I believe, is when it starts. And I'll be there a little earlier. I was just saying to Neil offline before we started recording that I want to celebrate my birthday in Egypt this year. So if anyone wants to join us even earlier, you guys can come and celebrate my birthday with me beside the Great Pyramid of Giza or something like that. So we've got lots to talk about today. We'll get into where you guys can connect with Neil and find out about all the things he's doing at the end of the show. And of course, check out the show notes for all those links. But for right now, Let's get into it. Before we get into the details of Egypt, and Neil's got a lot to present today. Everybody, he's got we're going to talk about the timelines of Egypt. We're going to talk about what is known as the Yuga cycles, or as Plato calls it, the Great Year. Many different names for this cycle of consciousness that happens on this planet Earth. We're also going to go into some of the acoustic and sound technologies used by the ancient Egyptians, or at least the evidence that we find still to this day in Egypt of their amazing ability for creating acoustic chambers and sound devices. But we're also going to be talking about a lot of interesting things. Before we do that, I always like to start the show with asking a little bit about you, Neil. What got you into this area initially? Let's give a little bit of a background on yourself. And, there's always a very interesting story behind why on earth we get into these really interesting, crazy topics. So what started it for you?
Yeah, so when what got me into the history component was really was a search for something spiritual. Like I was born and raised Hindu, so I pretty much just followed everything I was told. I never really believed anything specifically. I just like a lot of Indian people my age, back then and now even, they pretty much just follow the rites and rituals, and it's more of a social thing rather than a connection to God or source, right? So as I turned 18 in 2000, I started having questions and the reason why I was able to have these questions was because I never was told that my religion was the only way. So I never had the if you will, the arrogance of believing that my way is the only way, therefore everything else is BS. I will not even give it my time of day. I had been raised in England. We celebrate Christmas every year. I watched Jesus movies and Moses, and I was into everything. So since I was into all of that, I started seeing around 17, 18 years old that there were all these similarities in these ancient stories. And but these religions, especially like the first two that I looked at was Christianity and Hinduism, they're so inherently different, I've been told. Well, the main thing is one's monotheistic, one's a polytheistic religion, right? Even though that's a whole other story of how Hinduism really isn't polytheistic, and we're not going to get into that right now. But so if they were so different, and one had one god, one had multiple gods, how can there be any of these connections? How could Krishna have so many similarities to Christ? And I kept doing more research and realizing there was a lot of similarities, even text and words. Like in the beginning was Brahman, right? In John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word. Well, what's going on here? So I started getting curious about my first question that started it all was, what is the root of all religion? Is there a root, and is there a common thread that connects us all? And am I able to do some research and find that? So I continued to go and research. I was reading the Quran, I was reading the Bible, the Old Testament, the Bhagavad Gita, and at the same time researching other scriptures. And I pretty soon came across the Sumerian scriptures that were, we've been told are the oldest religious scriptures on the world. But side note, that's because we're told that they're the cradle of civilization. But what we're going to get in today is that Egypt might be the cradle of civilization, or is, I would say. And that's even a conspiracy in itself, detouring people from the true ancient culture to the Sumerians. So when I found the Sumerian text, I found Jordan Maxwell, William Henry, a few other spiritual people, but those two individuals speaking about the Sumerian scriptures, and Jordan Maxwell speaking about the sons of God. And the sons of God were these beings that came from another planet, and it's the exact same story as the fallen angels in the Old Testament. And I realized that this was one of the source texts. The Sumerian tablets of creation were one of the source material that many religions took their awareness from and took it around the planet. But there was one key difference. In all the religions that came after that, it was called God. But in the Sumerian scriptures and the ones before, they were called star beings, basically, beings from the stars. And there was even descriptions on where they came from. So in my mind, it was either I could completely say that all myth, all religion, everything on the world is complete BS and just go down the linear, we live and die kind of thing. Or maybe there's some truth in the fact that we were visited or even seeded or genetically enhanced by some sort of other being. So my ancient history research started with the star being research at the same exact moment. And then I just kept going down, deeper down the rabbit hole, attempting to piece together the lost and fragmented pieces of our existence to come up with a consensus of an origin of humanity. Where did we come from? Who are we? Did we come from off planet? And why don't we remember this? And why aren't we being told the truth if some of the individuals that hold power know about this, right? So that was the beginning of it all. And ever since then, I've been going deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole with all of it.
I mean, that's obviously it's a whole other podcast in and of itself right there. But I do want to quickly touch on one of your points, which was, when we look at like, okay, well, where's the evidence outside of maybe the scriptures, right, for having this, let's say, star being intervention,
Yes.
manipulation to the human genome? Well, like I just mentioned, the genome, it's in our DNA. Our DNA is kind of weird. Can you speak to that at all, Neil? Like the weirdness
Yes.
of our DNA, chromosome 2, all that kind of stuff?
Okay. So not that specifically, but I can speak about something else that backs that whole story
Please.
up. Is that in Darwinism, there's a reason why it's still called a theory, right? And it's just so interesting how everything in this world of duality is so extreme. We have the creationism, right? Which is like, we're only here for a few thousand years. We were created by God. And then we have the Darwinism, everything evolved. And it's interesting because the truth almost always lies somewhere in between. But if you have an ounce of the other side within your description of it all, then you're like a blasphemer to whatever side that is against you, right? Oh my God, you're just a religious zealot, or or the other way around. So there's two things within Darwinism that still makes it a theory, and the two things are that first one was plants, where the fossil record of plants became blossoming plants, like blossoming and basically spreading the spores around almost overnight. It was like a complete shift in what the plants and were on this planet. They became a completely different breed in a very short period of time, something that would take hundreds of thousands, if not even longer, to shift. And then the other thing, right, is that Homo erectus, our ancestors, became Homo sapien in like the blink of an eye. We can't even say overnight. We would have to say immediately, because there are no transitionary fossil records in between Homo erectus and Homo sapien. We have Homo erectus, and then we have a Homo sapien. So for a couple hundred years now, scientists have been waiting for the moment to discover the transitionary fossils, but we haven't found any. So that goes back up to the story of that maybe we were genetically altered. And the oldest Homo sapien fossil that's been found is around 250,000 years ago, which actually coincides with the Sumerian scriptures of the genetic mutation of humanity. So when you get a few coincidences and they all check out, then you've got to start asking questions.
Oh, 100%. And this is a phenomenal rabbit hole. It's one of my first rabbit holes as well, down in this area of ancient, history and where on Earth we come from, like the origins of our species. And, Darwin admits, even in the origins of species at the very end, he admits that it is a theory. And he was the first to be like, yeah, it's probably not going to hold a ton of water 100 years from now. And of course, that theory it's well over 150 years now, I think, at least. It's not exactly a new cutting edge theory. And it's something that I definitely encourage everyone to look into. But with the focus of today getting into Egypt, I think this is a great segue to let's talk about the origins of Egypt. Where, like you mentioned in the beginning, we are told that Mesopotamia or Sumeria was the cradle of civilization. That's where everything started. Of course, also, much like the plant life you were mentioning from millions of years ago, it kind of overnight shifted. Well, it's the same even with Sumeria or Sumer or Mesopotamia, that whole area. It kind of was a civilization overnight. There isn't much of, right? There isn't much of a track record or certainly not much information before that shows that we went from Stone Age, or from kind of living in caves, to hunter gatherer, to all of a sudden agriculture, mathematics, astronomy, etc. And it's pretty curious already. But you're telling me that we can go back even further, and we can probably take this back to Egypt. So what brought you into that knowledge?
Well, one of the first individuals, someone that we both worked with, is Robert Schoch. He's got me into that with the geological surveys. But there's also a documentary called The Pyramid Code on Netflix. It's a multiple series, and they go deep into many different elements that kind of show the true dating of Egypt, or at least when certain structures were in existence. Because the thing is, like, in this age, it's unfortunate that a lot of people, once you say that science says this, they just believe it. And a great example is when we know that we can carbon date things. So when someone says, I found this structure and this structure is this old, people don't question it. Even though, like, my question, just from being in this for so long, would be like, well, what did you exactly find? Did you find like a piece of wood that the thing is made out of? Is it made out of stone? Did you carbon date the last piece of papyrus that was found there? Somebody could have gone there 2,000 years afterwards and put that papyrus there, right? So when it comes to Egypt, a lot of it is based on speculation, and then also some hieroglyphs that give certain dates for things. However, as Robert Shaka said, and other ones, it seems like these hieroglyphs, one, some of them try to take credit for things that are even further in the past. And then two, some of them are actually the hieroglyphs of rebuilding structures that had already been there for quite some time. And going just a little deeper into that and doing that research, you start realizing that what we've been told about pre-dynastic Egypt and dynastic Egypt could be actually like 5,000-6,000 years off from what the true dating is.
Yeah, or even more potentially, right? And I liken that to like, let's say I go to New York City, I go to the Empire State Building, and I graffiti my name on the side of it this year in 2023. And then let's say worldwide disaster happens, wipes out everything. We kind of reset civilization, and 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 years later, there's new archaeologists digging up the Empire State Building, and they see Chris Noble spray painted on the side, like, oh, he must have built it, and it must have been in 2023 when he built that. And it's like, of course, that's not true at all. But that's the same logic that we're using when we date these sites. A lot of the time, we're carbon dating a body that's found inside the temple. Well, that doesn't mean the temple was built when the body was there. It means that that person was using that space, maybe repurposing it. So there's so many problems and holes in that theory, which is why we can start to look into deeper times, right?
Yeah, and a lot of places in Egypt that don't have hieroglyphs seem to be the older temples. So it's almost like, because Egypt existed, the written language, like 4, 5, 6,000 BC, we start seeing that, which is pre-dynastic Egypt. So, which is what we've been told conventionally. We start seeing hieroglyphs being introduced, but then the structures that were much older didn't have hieroglyphs. And one, for example, the Temple of Osirian only has the flower of life etched into it. No other hieroglyphs, right? So it's almost like as they were devolving in consciousness, and we'll get to this, and then language started happening, then they started, using their own form of graffiti and writing things in there. But maybe it's, for my own belief, is that they were at a level once where they didn't need to even put their egos on the walls. Who made these things? It wasn't even needed. Another great example of that is the Indus Valley civilization. There's like no credit given to anybody on any structure.
Yeah, and that's I think that's something I really recommend people looking into. Is the interesting thing is, the further back you go in time, the less hieroglyphs, the less writing, and also the bigger the stones, the more complex and complicated the construction, which is obviously the opposite of Darwin evolution. So how are we getting more advanced the further back we go?
Right. And Peru, just to go to Peru for a second, one of the biggest archaeological meccas on the planet, like, it's just everywhere. There's just so much, such a rich environment of history. You see all over the place older rock on below the newer rock and the newer construction. The technology behind that is archaic compared to the older ones. That signifies that maybe across the world, really, that we see this, that there was an advanced civilization existed before, and that something occurred, and then these individuals tried to figure out how to do it once again. When we talk about the Sumerians and Gilgamesh, for example, and Osiris, we have stories of these beings actually coming to these civilizations and bringing technology. There were giants that were bringing technology to these individuals to help teach them about our olden age after the Great Flood.
Yeah, there's just so much out there. So why don't we get into what you've uncovered here with the origins of Egypt, and who are these people? And I know the answer is not a simple answer. It's complex, like any of these things. Like you're saying, when science gives us these, like, oh, it's this, and that's it, and we're like, no. we all know that life is a bit more complex. And like you said, there's usually something in the middle is where closer to where the truth is. So
Right.
yeah, what have you discovered on these origins of the Egyptians?
So there's a conventional timeline that we've been given, and the Sumerians are a part of that timeline. You know, the beginning of agriculture, and then all of a sudden we have the cradle civilization, the first ever religious scriptures. Now, within that conventional timeline, about 8, 9, 10,000 years ago, we were pretty much primitive all around the planet, and that goes in alignment with the fact that we've been told, and a lot of people believe, that we're the most advanced human civilization has ever been, right? But it seems that what occurred around 13,000 years ago was an epic flood, right? As you know, that swept the planet, and there was a resetting of humanity. And this flood is also accepted by conventional wisdom, right? Conventional information, maybe not wisdom, like it's accepted conventionally. But the fact that there was a great civilization that existed before that could have been wiped out or reset isn't so accepted. But we know for sure that there's a collective trauma that all of humanity experienced, and it was something to do with this flood. And then almost every culture in the world, Quetzalcoatl, Gilgamesh, Osiris, has these individuals that stories of them jumping in a boat to take technology to different parts of the world that we didn't even know existed at that time, right? So even if we don't look even deeper and just look at what we've given there, their understanding of the world and continents and everything was much more advanced, things that we didn't realize until the 1700s, right? So what it seems to be is that, well, let me take a step back here and see where I want to start. So when it comes to Babylon, right, 6,000, 7,000 BC starting to be created, Mesopotamia and all of that, it seems that they maybe have had connections to the Egyptian people in North Africa that dated way before that. Robert Schoch's information that we can get into really quick here, when he did the geological studies of this Sphinx, he saw that the erosion was at least 11,000 years old of the Sphinx, meaning that it was around 4,000 or 5,000 years before we've been told that it was. And a few of the things that back that up was also that the Sphinx was actually built facing the constellation of Leo, right? And when you go back in the zodiacs, because every 2,000 years is a different zodiac in the sky, the last 2,000 years we've been Pisces, which is why the fish is the Jesus symbol. And if we go back all the way around 11,000 years ago, it was exactly the moment that the Sphinx was facing the constellation of Leo. And there's other things that back that up as well. So the question is, were the Egyptians in dynastic and pre-dynastic Egypt the same Egyptians that were there originally? And if these structures were in existence 11,000 years ago, how much further back were they even created? Because some people think, like Billy Carson believes, that the Sphinx was actually created in 36,000 BC, because that was another full Yuga cycle around that the constellation of Leo was right in front of it.
And I believe I think Jonathan E. West also was around that timeline as well, because one of his reasons I remember him mentioning was that if you think about it, 12,500 years ago, roughly, was the Great Cataclysm that we know from ice core samples from Iceland or Greenland area, and other biological metrics we can actually look at. This some absolute major cataclysm definitely happened in that time frame. And so if you're a major civilization, the several thousand years after that major cataclysm, there were repeat minor cataclysms after that. It was tumultuous on this planet. There's a reason why there's a lot of myths and folklore and oral traditions talking about how humans went underground to survive and just to stay off the surface. It was so volatile. So would you really be constructing these monuments that clearly last thousands and thousands of years during a period of time that's so tumultuous and difficult to even live and survive on the surface? Right. Unlikely, right? So what's the next timeline where the Leo constellation lines up, where the zodiac lines up? It's what, 36, did you say 36,000 years ago roughly? Or
yeah, so it's basically 11,000 years ago plus another 25,000.
Right.
Yeah.
So with that, it's just like, okay, then that's the most logical next timeline that they would have built it in, if it was indeed lined up to that zodiac cycle, because at least then we weren't in a tumultuous cataclysmic period, right?
Exactly. And another thing that is also accepted conventionally, because I like to put in, what is actually accepted conventionally that backs up what we've been saying or people have been saying or scriptures have been saying for a while, is that the Sahara Desert was a lush oasis, a green mecca. It was the perfect place. The whole of North Africa was the perfect place for people to live and civilization to flourish for quite some time. And during the Ice Age, right, that the major Ice Age that ended 13,000 years ago, 11,000 years ago, we're still actually in a minor Ice Age. But the major Ice Age that ended at the Younger Dryas period, the north and south was pretty much under ice for the most part. The best place to live was that thick, green, lush area around the equator. And it's so interesting that the most unexcavated place on the entire planet is the Sahara Desert. So there's a lot of, you could speculate on the reasons why. Maybe a lot of people have bought the hype that there's nothing to find there. Or maybe they're concerned that if we started looking there, what are we going to find? Because if Egypt was around in existence around that time, and it extended over the whole of North Africa, right? Because this gets into the fall of Atlantis and the migration through North Africa, through Morocco, and the Berber people, their DNA connected to this civilization that was off the ocean. The whole of North Africa probably was connected to maybe an off colony, like a colony from those Atlanteans right there. And I feel like now that we have LiDAR technology, I feel a lot of people and independent researchers are beginning to do research in the Sahara Desert. And I've even watched a few videos of people saying that incredible things have found cavities under the Sahara Desert, but no one's really going there to excavate it yet. I think it's just a matter of time before we start peeling those layers back. And I truly believe like the excavations in North Africa will be one of the major things that help us start redefining and rewriting our history.
Yeah, 100%. With these new technologies, like you mentioned, LiDAR, and probably some other ones that are going to be coming out, and better versions of ground penetrating radar, things like that. Google Earth, even, just these additions we've had for the last maybe 5, 6, 7 years have been huge. There was the Amazon that they did some LiDAR with several years back, and they uncovered tons of buried cities that would have housed over millions of people, and just showing that there was absolutely a massive race of humans globally around this planet. So yeah, we're just scratching the surface. I feel like we've got about 1% of our history actually figured out at this stage.
Yeah. But it's just all there waiting to be tapped into. The evidence is hidden in plain sight. It's not like if we all collectively decided right now that we want to know our true history, including the elite who don't want to know it at this moment. If we'd all decided that, it wouldn't be a slow process. It would all be like, okay, let's just start looking at the places that we've been ignoring. For example, if Islam wasn't the major religion in Egypt, how, and we could do it in a way that we were allowed to go in and, respectfully extract certain things and look at the history there in different caverns that have been closed off, places that we can't visit, so many sections of Egypt that are just untapped, and we're not able to even look at, will redefine everything that we know, right? So there's this chokehold on it, and not all of it is deliberate. Some of it is based on just belief systems. Some of it's based on religion, and a lot of it's based on fear. The fear of what will happen if we realize the truth about this all. And just to jump to Peru really quick once more, in Peru, the Catholic government there has a really huge invested interest in not allowing certain things to go out to the public. And one of which would be the Paracas skulls and the elongated skull beings that actually there's evidence for those in Egypt as well. So it seems that religion, fundamental religion in itself, has been a hindrance to a lot of this coming out. But yeah, if we all decided in this moment that we're not going to, there's no inhibitions, we got nothing to fear, let's just find out our truth, I think we're going to find out a lot of stuff in a very short period of time.
And I feel like we're in the golden age right now of archaeology in terms of these technologies coming out and the level of consciousness that is expanding on this planet. And the people like you and myself, and of course all of you watching and listening right now, we are part of that frequency of people, that consciousness of human beings that are going to be the ones to uncover this incredible, again, plethora of information, of a story that will be better than any science fiction book or film you have ever seen, ever. They're all based off of a lot of these ancient stories anyway. And to be honest, they're just getting some of it, and the rest of it is far more spectacular than you could ever imagine. And I wanted to maybe segue, unless you had something else you wanted to add, Neil, about into the Yuga cycles. And getting more into the fact that this is how we're dating things. What are the Yuga cycles for those listening right now and watching?
Yeah, I'll just add one more thing and I'll get into that.
Please.
That one of the first layers of our evolution of consciousness is the reclaiming of our ancient history. And it's so interesting and so paradoxical the way the universe works. The way that we can truly, the enlightenment that we're going through and the consciousness we're going through is a presence of the now moment and really being present in this in our bodies, in this existence with each other. But the paradox is when we reclaim our history, we have more of an ability to be present in this now, because not only were we so advanced and had such amazing information about who we are, where we come from, how the universe works, things that we can't even understand at this moment, how to live in harmony and peace, right? Not only do we have all that information coming up, but also how to navigate cataclysms and how to navigate the galaxy and the universe and the cosmic weather in order to avoid catastrophes that seem to happen every 13,000 years. Because we actually have the technology now to be able to do that, where some of these ancient civilizations maybe didn't, some of them welcomed it. You know, there's an article on physics.org that I show in some of my presentations. And in that article, they say that from all their research, their bottom line is Earth is adhering to some sort of cosmic pattern that is attracting cataclysms. That was their words, right? Okay, we'll break that down. Earth is adhering to some sort of cosmic pattern, the pattern that we can see. That means like it's basically a defined maneuvering happening that we can actually track and see what's going on. And this maneuvering is not going into, not accidentally being in, it's attracting cataclysms that happen every 13,000 years. That was the full thing, right? So what could happen if we learn from our past and all the evidence that they put for us in Egypt, especially? Egypt is so intentionally created. Every rock, every stone, every distance, every foot, every hieroglyph, even the position of Thoth's staff on a wall is all done in the perfect angles and mathematics for us to not only rebuild civilization, but also navigate the cosmos in a way that's harmonious.
I mean, it's so kind of blows my mind as you're reminding me of some of these things and also enlightening me because I didn't know all that. And you know, it's interesting to when you uncover a lot of this information from distant times, you learn about, like you said, cosmic weather. And I find that is something that we do. We pay attention to our earthly weather sometimes. We never pay attention to our cosmic weather because it's so out of our everyday life in terms of the consciousness that we're distracted, of course, by so many other things going on that the last thing we're thinking of is what's going on beyond the atmosphere of our planet. But of course, it's a busy universe and there's a lot going on.
Yeah. Just like we have the solar system that's affecting Earth, well, the galaxy is affecting the solar system, and the universe is affecting the galaxy. And so that's the whole expansion. And this ties straight into the Yuga cycles here, and I'll get into that, is that we have a solar systematic mentality. Well, actually, we have an earthly mentality that's becoming solar systematic. And then the expansion of that is the galactic expansion of consciousness, and then the universal one. And as we expand out of that, time also becomes more fluid. Like you have the Earth, you have the hardcore linear grounded Earth physical plane. You have the solar system, you have the linearity of the third dimension. You have the galaxy. Now you have the circular momentum of our galaxy around the central sun, right? And all of these are basically affecting each other. And as we expand the awareness, for lack of a better term, we're able to control the elements once we understand how it works and we get to that level of consciousness. Now, the Yuga cycles are connected to our position of our solar system around our central sun, which is actually the black hole in the center of the galaxy. And it's, our solar system is also connected to it in a way that our solar system, if you look at the galaxy as a flat plane, which is a word I use loosely because what is a flat plane in space? If we look at the Milky Way galaxy as a flat plane, our solar system is kind of doing a Fibonacci spiral up and below, up, down, up, down, up, down. We go around 200 light years above the plane of the Milky Way galaxy and 200 light years below. And we're above it for 13,000 years. We're below it for 13,000 years. The Great Year, the Yuga cycle is 26,000 years. Some people say it's 25,000 years. plus or minus a few hundred. And this Yuga cycle Yuga cycle has 4 different ages within it. Now, there's a Yuga cycle within a Yuga cycle. Basically, look at it as the cogs. What's it called? Is it cogs in a clock, or
Yeah, the
the
gears.
the gears in a clock, right? So you have that one clock, and then you have a gear within it going around, right? So you think about the one in the middle of it as the 26,000 year one. And that's basically our solar system's rotation and the precession of the zodiac and the equinoxes. So, and then you have the other one, which is the galactic zodiac. The galactic one is hundreds of thousands of years, the Yuga cycle. The solar systematic one is 26,000 years. So there's a greater Yuga cycles. And with this theory, I think it expands beyond that, because all the galaxies are actually rotating around something central in our universe. So I think there's even a greater cycle within that, and then maybe even one if you look at the multiverse. We don't know how far it goes out, because how fractalized are we from the original source? So the one we're talking about here is the 26,000 year one. So within that, there's 4 ages. There's every ancient civilization pre-flood, or the ones that at least talk about the times pre-flood, talk about the ages of humanity. But there's only one civilization that actually has the dates, and that's in India. And in a moment, I'll show that calendar and show you the dates. So, but the ancient Kabbalistic text talks about it. In China, they talk about it. And there was a Greek poet.
Mayans.
The Mayans talk about it. Yep, exactly. Their calendar's based on it. And then we have what was the other one? We have also the Greeks. There was a poet, multiple people in Greece, but there was a poet that spoke about it and wrote a poem about the different ages. So the ones that I like to go into and speak about is the Greek one, because it's just so interesting, and then also the Indian one. So in the Greek one, they didn't say about the years. What he did was create a poem speaking about what type of man existed in each age, right? So it's a really beautiful one, because not that many other ancient cultures talked about how men and women people existed during those times. So it speaks about the Kali Yuga and the darkness and the wars and the battle and the delusion and the hatred. And it speaks about the other ages all the way to the golden age, and talks about the evolved man. Now,
And just quickly, Neil, sorry about interrupt there,
no,
but it's like we've got we've got the bronze, we've got the Iron Age, we've got the Bronze Age, we've got the Silver Age, and the Golden Age. That's the English current, let's call it sort of modern terminology that we've used for these cycles. And then, of course, in the India Vedic texts, they're called different cycles, right? And that's what we can get into. But they're all referring to the same thing. So when we talk about, is it the Kali would be considered the Iron Age, or am I on the opposite side of that?
Ages, also known as the Dark
also
Ages.
known as the Dark Ages, exactly. And this all has to do with how it interacts with human consciousness, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, within this calendar here, so I'll break down the Yuga cycles and what each of these mean. So we have the Kali Yuga, as we just spoke about, which is the Dark Ages. We have the Dwapara Yuga, which is the Bronze Age. We have the Treta Yuga, the Silver Age, and the Satya Yuga, which is the Golden Age. And now let's first look at, since we're talking about Egypt here, let's look about, the time that they say that the Sphinx was around, which was at least 10,900 BC. Which is right at this time right here. As you can see, if we go 11,500 BC, that's exactly just over 13,000 years ago. That's exactly at the top of the Yuga cycle. And I'll speak about each cycle in a moment. And Chris, feel free to cut me off any moment to make comments and talk about anything here. And so around the time that the Sphinx was created was in existence, at least, was this right here. Each of these periods from here to here is a 200-year period. So in between each cycle, there's a 200-year transitionary phase from one age to another age. If you look back in ancient history and books of major things that happened, Great Wars, the Trojan War, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, a lot of these things actually occurred at these times. If you can actually track it back, it's what I've done is, ever since I became a certified Yuga Cycle instructor a few years ago, went to like an online college for learning this, and as I did, I started implementing in all my presentations, my sound healing presentation, my Sumerian presentation, my Egypt presentation, my Pythagoras presentation. because this is a great slide to put everywhere, because when you're talking about dates all the time, then just throw this up there and then try to see where these major things occurred and see if you can relate it to the level of consciousness.
And just for the listening audience here, this is like basically like a pie chart almost in a sense, but it's like a circular disc that we're talking about here. And these ages, you know, the Satya versus the Treta and the Dwarpara and then the Kali at the end, you can see how the Satya, which is the golden age, is the largest, the longest part of this chart, let's say. Then we get to Treta, or the Bronze Age. That's a little smaller now. And then we get to the Silver Age, or the Dwarpara, right? And then the Kali at the end, which would be the Iron, or the Dark Age. So you can see from this chart, for those of you listening who can't see this right now, that it starts off with these higher levels of consciousness do last for longer periods of time, which is very interesting. Yes. And so just so you guys know that this is what we're talking about, is kind of like a disc type of chart here.
Yeah. And it's also interesting to note that, so half of it, one half of it is 13,000 years. The other half is 13,000 years. The Kali Yuga on both sides are connected. So the Kali Yuga is twice as long as one of the Kali Yugas, which is still pretty small because, as you just said, Chris, that every age going downwards consecutively gets smaller and smaller. The Satya Yuga is actually connected at the top, which is twice as long as one Satya Yuga. So it's the huge amount of time that we get to spend in this golden age. Now, each of these ages have actually a theme to it. And so I'm going to go over the themes right now. But first, let's take a look at where we are, right? So there's actually two graphs within the Indian text of the dating of the Kali Yuga, and they're about 200 to 300 years off. This is the one that I go by because I've done more research on this one. I've done research on the other one too. I feel this one's more in alignment, but a couple hundred years off doesn't make too much of a difference. The major difference that it does make is that some people still say that we're in the Kali Yuga. This one says that we exited the Kali Yuga in 1700. And this is, now let me tell you about the themes and then kind of show you why that could actually be the case. Because, when you first come into another age, it's not like all of a sudden the old age is completely gone. There's a lot of, and what you normally see, and again, you can track this through history books, is that when you go into another age from an older age, there's this one civilization or a group of people or a group of communities that are attempting to hold on to the ways from the old age. And those communities start crumbling at a very fast rate, or countries even, and the systems start falling down because they can't be sustained anymore. And this also happens in the higher ages as we're dropping down. A good example of this is the Indus Valley civilization. The Indus Valley civilization was a threat that was coming out of the Treta age into the Dwarpa age. When they were coming into the Dwarpa age, the rest of the world were falling deep into Dwarpa. The Indus Valley civilization was an experiment on how can we maintain the Treta age awareness. And within that was no hierarchy, no text on the walls saying who owns what, no pyramids, no ziggurats, no temples, no castles, all just like equality. And we also see evidence in this Valley civilization of it being a group of civilizations around the world exiting their own countries and re-finding themselves with a different group of people in the Indus Valley civilization, creating a new place. So it was almost like Treta Yuga ended, all the communities from all the civilizations in the world that didn't want to be a part of this default society left and then created their own civilization in this valley. And you see that also in Palenque. So Palenque, which was founded around 3000 BC, same time as the fall from Treta to Dwarpa. And there's all this evidence there. There's even ancient Aramaic, kind of pre-Aramaic text on the walls there. And it seems like that in the beginning of the civilization of the Maya, there were all these cultures from around the world that basically went into the Maya continent and they started sharing all their wisdom, and they founded what eventually became the Mayan civilization. At that point, there were different cultures. There were, Chinese, Asian-looking people. There was people from ancient India. There were, the future Israelites. There were the indigenous of Mexico. And now, what do you think of a Maya person? What do you think he looks like? Well, a Chinese, Indian, Mexican, all of those people. It was basically they got together and then, they ended up looking similar after thousands of years.
And also, you get some stuff like in, I think it's more in South America, the Olmec, those Olmec heads And they're so clearly depicting very different races and quite a large variety, certainly of Asian and African
Yep.
descent, and that's in South America. So, and we found, evidence in Egypt of the not I believe cocaine or the cocaine leaf in some of the mummies in Egypt, and that's only available. That plant only exists, of course, in South America. And then when I was in Egypt, I remember our guide Mohammed Ibrahim showed us a depiction on one of the temples, I can't remember where, of an animal that's native to only Australia. So little things like this, like you're saying at the beginning of this presentation in this podcast, we have been far more active, very much more transatlantic and much more
Yes.
global planet, even in our more recent past and distant past. And this idea of the oceans being a wall for us to, that divided, or not even divided, but just isolated all these cultures is a complete load of BS, because clearly there's so much cross cultural mixing, just like it is today.
Exactly. I mean, even the hieroglyphs about Osiris actually says that he left his wife for a while and traveled the world, basically teaching societies on how to build structures. And then at the same time, we see the Quetzalcoatl and stories of him helping build Teotihuacan, and he was a giant. So it's like, were there multiple giant-like individuals that went around the planet, or is this one group of people that went around that we just gave different names for? So yeah, there's enough stories out there explaining and speaking about them going across different areas of the world. And talking about the Egyptians again, if some of you may have heard about the stories of Egyptian artifacts found in the Grand Canyon, right? And now I'm here to tell you right now that this story has so much incredible evidence behind it. It's not just something that someone said. It's not just that one article from the Smithsonian that you can find online through Google Images. If you type in Smithsonian Egypt Grand Canyon, and that shows you this whole thing of, there's a few archaeologists that were in the Grand Canyon. They found a Sphinx-like structure. They found pyramids. They found mummy bodies. Actually, there's a video on YouTube now that they show you the diaries of the journalists and the archaeologists that were there and read from it, explaining what they found. And not to go too deep down on this tangent here, but they found a whole entire city inside the mountains in the Grand Canyon, and the diaries speak about the entrance of it, what they found in there, the different caverns in there. And then after these two individuals who found this structure, then they sent a letter to the Smithsonian, and the Smithsonian sent a whole team of archaeologists out there, and it was a full-on archaeological site where they went in and they got so much research, so much evidence of what had occurred over there. So all this information is out there, but I'm really excited about this latest discovery of these journals, because I feel that now we have more evidence rather than just one article that people call the Smithsonian. People I know call the Smithsonian and ask them to confirm that this article is from them. But what they usually do is, when they can't lie, just in case it might come back to them, they just say, we can't confirm or deny
Isn't that the way, right?
Right.
We've done some episodes on our other podcast, the Fireside Chats, with myself and my good friend Brandon, and we've done our most successful episodes so far on giants. And of course, there's tons of screening that comes with us, and we've presented a couple of photographs that we later found were not legitimate, because there's a lot of stuff out there that is fake. However, when I was doing some of that research, I came across the Grand Canyon research that then goes into all these Egyptian relics and findings that they found in the Grand Canyon. But I didn't know how much more legitimacy there was in that. For me, it did look like they've done a good job kind of cleaning up the web there and not leaving too much of a trail. But what we found with the giant stuff, of course, is the Smithsonian's famous for covering these things up, and or just can't confirm nor deny. But for those listening, I'll bug Neil for this after the podcast here. I would love some of those links to the Grand Canyon research on Egypt, because if and I'll get that, I'll put that in the show notes for you guys watching and listening, because that's something I want to follow up on personally. That's pretty incredible, because the implications of that are crazy, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, even though we have evidence of other cultures probably going around the world, the one reason why the whole Egyptian thing is so interesting is because we're now piecing together the fact that they're thousands of years older, and it could have even been, which we see in a lot of ancient structures, is that the Egyptians that we know of that came later, the ones that we talk about pre-dynastic and dynastic Egypt, might not even be the original Egyptians. These things could have been evacuated before they even arrived there. And a lot of times we see hieroglyphs written on top of older scriptures, and hiding things to show evidence of an ancient culture there. So either they just had a really big ego and they were like, we don't care about what our ancestors are saying. We need to say, this is me because I'm such a big pharaoh, or it could have been that there was a whole new population there. And over a period of 13,000 years, 36,000 years, who knows what occurred? How many migrations occurred in that area? Right?
Look at the last 10 years, how much has changed on this planet, let alone 100, right? And that's just 100 years. Yeah. We're talking thousands here, people. So I mean, so much could have happened. So who do you think, Neil? I mean, who are the original Egyptians then? Because yes. I don't even have any idea really who these could be.
So that's a good way to segue back into this, so I can tell you the themes of each cycle, and then go back to Atlantis, and then connect it to this Yuga cycle in Egypt.
Beautiful.
So let's talk about Kali Yuga first. So in the Indian scriptures, another thing that they say is the themes of each cycle of age. And the Kali Yuga has a couple of themes, and one is the age of delusion, the age of hierarchy, and the age of authority. Okay, so I know most of you listening to me probably just like light bulb goes off. Oh yeah, of course, that makes sense. But I'll break it down just a tad bit. So the age of delusion, what's right is wrong. What's wrong is right. For example, if you take these pills, you'll heal yourself. But if you take these vitamins, you'll kill yourself.
Oh, it's so applicable to our day and age right now. I love it. Oh my God.
Right? And then also the society and what we value is delusional, right? We're creating fake systems. We're incepting ourselves into this matrix of fakeness, and this system that we've created, this monetary system, Wall Street, and all this stuff, that we're so fragmented from the original intent of our existence, to be human beings, connect with the planet and each other. Disconnection. The age of hierarchy and authority. So this is the age where we have hierarchical structures. We have governments, police, people, we had peasants, we had kings, queens, and authority, where we give up power to authority. So I'm sure all this sounds very familiar. And so there's so much to say here. Every time I say something, I remember something else, and I know it's going to take us down another tangent. But I just realized here. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I was going to say it's all good. Please tangent away, because this is all fascinating.
Yeah. So the beginning 700 BC was the beginning of a whole entire monotheistic wash across the entire planet. The Israelites were not a monotheistic community. They believed in multiple gods, multiple deities. One of the gods was actually called Anshar, right? This is ancient, in ancient Hebrew scriptures. Anshar. In 700 BC, something occurred on the planet where a lot of these ancient cultures that were connected to multiple deities started moving towards monotheism. And one of the major ones that became so huge for other religions to come out of, Judaism, what came out of it? Islam and Christianity. What are the three major religions? All three of those. But why is this one more important? Well, it was the one that started the other two, right? So it's hugely important. In 700 BC, there was this movement for ancient Judaism to become and be based on one God. And in the ancient scriptures and the Sumerian scriptures you see too, you have to choose me over the others. That's what Yahweh said to his people, said, choose one over all. I am the one, you need to choose me, right? Well, if there's only one God, why is one God telling you to choose him over all the other ones? And then all of a sudden in 700 BC, we see this this washing over all of this ancient Israelite culture, that every story about every other deity within that ancient Judaism all got their name changed to one name, Yahweh. So 90% of the stories of Yahweh were actually about other gods, one of which being Anshar, which was a female god from the Pleiades, right? And we did a presentation with Paul Wallace just recently, epic dude, and we went deep into this. It's on my YouTube, youtube.com/Portal to Ascension. And so how interesting is it that in 700 BC, when we fell into the Kali Yuga, was the same time we have this washing of monotheism, right? And then the delusion of being one God became something that we got so delusional about. No, there's not multiple. There's only one source. There's only one God, which is even is a fractalization from the original source. We're not even really worshiping the original source. We're worshiping a God that said, "You better choose me over the other ones." Right?
A very threatening God, a God that feels like there's
Exactly.
a solid ego behind this God, which makes me feel like it is a being that's trying to maybe impose some power over a bunch of people, or something
Hmm.
like that. Regardless of what it is, it's so interesting how that happens right at the 700 BC mark.
Yeah.
And it seems like there are these absolute spikes in, let's say, activity, that shifts, a paradigm, major paradigm shifts happen on these.
Those times.
And look at, like, so regardless if we ended the Kali Yuga at 1700, or if it was maybe 300 years later, let's say after 2012, which was, I know, another potential ending of that cycle. That's why the whole everyone was freaking out about the Mayan calendar and the end of the world and all this stuff. That was also a potential end of this Kali Yuga. And look what's going on their planet right now. I mean, it's never been this chaotic in quite a long time. Is this, do you think, Neil, a sign that we've crossed over this threshold, perhaps into the, the Dwarpa age, or what do you think, the Bronze Age, I guess, too?
Yeah, so what usually happens if you again look at the historical context of in between ages is that there's an upheaval of the old age and a lot of systems start falling. But we've been relying on those systems for hundreds of thousands, hundreds if not thousands of years. So we've been relying on it so much that it's almost like an initial chaos of a lot of people trying to hold on to their own beliefs, their old ways, and some people are still stuck within that. It takes some time to move over, which is why there's this 200-year transitory phase and basically a couple of generations for us to move. But it's interesting also know that the ancient Indian text says that age doubles in every cycle. So, we had the age of 120. If we didn't have pollution, chemicals, and all this stuff in this age, we'd all lived and we, worked out moderately. We'd all live till 120. The age of the Dwarpa Yuga is 240, and then it doubles up in the Treta, and then I believe it doubles up in Satya. I know it doubles with Dwarpa and the Treta,
Yeah,
and then
this
we have
this actually, sorry, Neil, this
yeah,
actually coincides with some of the kings lists, right? Because we've seen, when we look back into some of the Sumerian clay tablets and even the Egyptian kings list, some of these kings, the further back you go, much longer they're living. They live to
right.
be quite an incredible age. So, do you think, is that linked together, or?
Yeah, I think it's linked, but it's also interesting because the Sumerian kings lists are like thousands of years.
Yeah, yeah,
So I have a whole presentation on Gilgamesh where I go deeper into that, where I gave an alternative viewpoint of the kings list, maybe not being actual dates of that, but
oh,
being each one of them being a representative of the galactic Yuga cycle, because each one of their ages that they were, the times that they were in power, is the same as the Yuga cycles within the galactic zodiac.
fascinating.
So it
Wow.
could be like, how the Greeks were saying that each one of these beings were like this at this time. It could be like this type of king represents the type of people that existed then, and also maybe like the the facilitator, the overseer, if you will, of that kind of thing, that kind of kingly energy. That's just
Interesting.
one. That's a theory that I only came up with. So I'm not too sure. All I know is that I have more questions.
I love that. I love that. Okay. Well, anyway, carry on. This is all so fascinating.
Okay. So now that I went on the tangent 700 BC, let's get back to the themes. So we have those themes in the Kali Yuga. Now we supposedly exited the Kali Yuga in 1700 and went through a 200-year transitory phase to the Dwarpa Yuga. Now the theme of the Dwarpa Yuga is the age of sovereignty, the ideological communities, also meaning that the communities and the structures in the Kali Yuga start collapsing, and then people start creating communities based on ideology in the Dwarpa. Spiritual communities, conscious communities, people that don't want to live consciously create their own communities. They want to, and this even goes into Edgar Casey's prophecies of the US splitting into four and based on their ideologies and everything. And but the number one theme of the Dwapara Yuga is the age of energy. Well, the age of energy represents multiple things. What happened around 1700? Well, electricity started coming about, right? So we started having light bulbs and things like that. Energy, right? What happened in with the in the end of the Kali Yuga, the beginning of the Dwapara Yuga during that phase was we started having a revival of linear sciences that were actually moving us towards a breakaway from the chokehold that religion had on the planet. We had Newton, we had Galileo, all which were devout atheists. So we had atheist scientists coming about based on linearity, fighting against the structure of the Catholic Church that had, swept the whole planet at that point. And the reason for this atheism wasn't a bad thing. It was almost like religion had been corrupted in such a way and become so delusional that in order to come out with some truths about how matter works, how physics is, they had to break away from those constructs in society. So that's happening in the transitionary phase. And then 1900 hits. 1900, we move into the Dwapara age. What happens in around 1900? We have three individuals that come onto the scene within the first 20 years: Max Planck, Nikola Tesla, and then Einstein, all which were very spiritual individuals. We have a dropping of the atheistic spirituality, and we have a breaking beyond the linear sciences into the quantum world. Max Planck, basically was the one who discovered, not founded, discovered the discipline of quantum physics as we know it. And then Einstein, and then I don't even need to tell you about Tesla. The guy was beyond anything that was even ready to be accepted at that point. And so basically, when we entered the realm of energy, we started having electricity, then we went into the quantum world. So what happens at the end of the Dwapara Yuga is that we not only dive deep into the quantum world and become masters of the subatomic world, but we start realizing we are quantum. We are non-physical beings that can vibrate, and we become the masters of our own energetic fields. So it starts with this external explosion technology of electricity, all the way to the internal world, all the way into technology for the internal world that eventually results in realizing we are technology and how can we use our own consciousness with that. So by the time we exit the Dwapara Yuga, we become masters of our own Merkabas and own energy fields. Then we enter the Treta Yuga, and Treta Yuga has multiple themes as well, but it's also the beginning of the age of telepathy. It's when we start the craft of telepathy and communicating through. It's the mental age, known as the mental age, right? And the mental has got a bad rap during these last few hundred years because we're connecting to the heart, and the mind has been corrupted for so long. But after we do this cleansing of our entire energetic field in the Dwapara Yuga, we start being able to use our mind and have something that, Bashar, one of the people I've worked with before, guy who channels Bashar, calls it telepathy. Okay, not telepathy, but telepathy. We start using our empathy in order to communicate through our mental state and become telepathic beings. And by the end of the Treta Yuga, we are telepathic beings. And then we stop writing language on the ground, right? We stop writing language on paper, and we get into the Satya Yuga, the age of transparency, the golden age, the connection. It's important to note that in every age, there are always those that remain in the age before it. However, when you go into the higher ages, it gets lesser and lesser and lesser. When you go into the lower ages, there still are Satya Yuga people living in the Kali Yuga. I mean, I don't even need to go into all the avatars that have come across, including Jesus and other beings that have come on the planet. We still have those beings. They're just a smaller community. So when we get into the Satya Yuga, we then have telepathy. We don't need written language. And, I'll just say one more thing here, and then we'll have a conversation about what I just shared. Let's go back in time now, 13,000 years ago, to the Great Flood and the Younger Dryas period and the existence of the Sphinx right here in the top, around 10,000 to 11,500 BC. We don't see written language until the beginning of the Treta Yuga. Do you see how this works for the same way on the way up? Written language all the way until we become telepathic beings, and boom. So in the Satya Yuga right here, we're coming down. All of a sudden, we see hieroglyphs, 6,700 BC, the beginning of the Mesopotamia as we know it, the ancient Mesopotamians, right? And then we start seeing the tablets of creation being created. But these tablets aren't talking about a time right now. They're talking about the ages that existed before, right? And then we start we start losing our ability to have telepathy. And when that happens, we start seeing the invention of tools to attempt to keep us at the level of consciousness that we were at the age before. We see the hieroglyphs of the Ankh. We see all these other tools on things in Egypt that people have speculated and believe were acoustic resonators and different types of technology in order to keep us at a level of consciousness that existed before. And then we continue to fall from grace, right? Literally, the spiritual term falling from grace is a literal depiction of us falling from these ages into lower ones. And then we get into the older age and we start all over again. And it's basically a process of forgetting and remembering, forgetting and remembering. And while we do that, we gain tools, insight, darkness, we clear karma, we clear galactic karma, we go into the higher ages, we remember, we create technologies, we unite, and then we go through this process again. And I don't want to end it on that one, end it on this, on a higher note, because it kind of seems like doom and gloom when you keep saying like, damn, what are we doing this for? We keep forgetting and remembering, right? So the whole purpose of this is to break free from the cycle. So the whole evolution that's going on right now that many people have believe, and at first I didn't believe it because I was like, no, we're in this cycle. Who are we to say that we should break free from it? But now I'm starting to lean towards that we are breaking free from the cycle of forgetting, and we're going to get into remembrance that will last for a long, long time so that we can eventually be the ETs to other planets.
Wow. Wow. I love that, Neil. Thank you so much for all of that. I mean, my brain's racing right now. So many things I want to say to that. And, I'd say the first for me, and this is just a theory that I've been thinking about over the years. And let me know what you think about this. It's on topic, but a little outside of the ages here. So when we're going back into these, let's say the golden age, right, where everything is really not written down, everything is telepathic, everything is felt in other dimensional fields, let's just say. So I'm wondering when we come across some of these sites that were probably most likely from the golden age, let's say the Assyrian in Egypt, where there's no writing other than this almost lasered in flower of life that we find at a top left corner of a pillar, very kind of out of the way. You have to really look for it to find it. Other than that, there's nothing in this temple. And it feels very ancient. It feels very, very old. And it's complex. The way it's designed is these megalithic blocks, some of them wrapping around corners and then seamlessly forming with other blocks. I mean, it's mind-boggling, the construction. So it's clearly highly advanced. Now, there's no writing, there's no nothing, but we know that a lot of these temples are built out of granite, and granite that has a lot of quartz crystal in it. And a lot of these more ancient temples, certainly around the world, are built with an extremely dense type of rock that typically has crystals of some kind, quartz crystals, things like that in them. And now we know with computers and even with more primitive radio technology and stuff in the early 1900s, we still to this day use crystals for a lot of our technology because crystals do two major things among probably many, many others, which is piezoelectric energy, right? Or piezoelectric energy, which is when you put pressure onto a crystal, it creates electricity. And this is where you get some of the original quartz watches that power the watches, quartz radio, crystal radios that were powered by crystal. And even on film sets, I learned recently that the clock that they use to sync up all your audio and video is also being calculated by a quartz crystal as well. So we know that they do that. And of course, with the Silicon Valley, all the computers, we know that crystal holds information and data. So I've always wondered, are some of these ancient temples ancient hard drives? Have they found a way to consciously encode information into the rock, and it's not written, but it's of a level of consciousness maybe needed to download maybe some of this information from these places? Like, what are your thoughts on that, Neil? I'm curious.
Yeah, I've heard similar things to what you said, but not in the way you said it just now. And I feel so definitely, let's just talk about regular rock. Regular rocks are known as the record keepers of the planet. And people have claimed to be able to extract information awareness from it. there's also a technology in order to basically pull information out of different structures, stones, and gems. So crystal quartz happens to be one of the best ways in order to maintain and keep information. So not only could it actually have been encoded actually through physical beings, telepathy, with telepathy, like imagine the ability to send a signal into some structure and encode it with awareness. And then that will take Egypt to a whole other level that is beyond even what I said, because I'm saying the whole of Egypt is designed to help you rebuild all of civilization and know our position in the galaxy. But if they were also encoded with this information, that once we get to a level of technology, we can extract actual historical records from it. Wow, right? That's really next level. So I don't doubt that that's possible at all. And a good example would also be the crystal skulls, which we're doing a conference on at the end of the year. We're bringing a lot of the ancient crystal skulls together in Sedona in November, and
That's
the
exciting.
whole concept.
We'll definitely
Yeah,
put
it's
some
going to be
links
pretty
below for
big.
you guys because I want to check that out. That sounds incredible. Anyway, sorry,
Yeah,
keep going. That's
yeah, they
that's
haven't
wicked.
been together since 2011. So we're bringing them together first time since 2011. Yeah, it's next level, dude. And one of them was found here in the Yucatan, right, at one of the pyramids. So these were supposedly ancient skulls taken from Atlantis and encoded with the historical records of humanity. And it's the perfect way in order to encode information so that we can, it's an ancient hard drive. So yeah, I feel that you're definitely onto something there. And once we're just not at the technology to even realize what has been left for us to extract.
And on this topic of technology that's been lost to us, of course, myself as a musician, I'm always fascinated with the sound side of things, right? And how sound is used, and the acoustic chambers that we find throughout this ancient world, and especially in Egypt. My personal experience being inside the Great Pyramid of Giza and in the King's Chamber specifically, your voice will echo and reverberate for a long time in that room. The construction, of course, is pretty mind-boggling. And when I started doing some chants, improvised with no idea what I was doing, just finding some frequencies in my own body that felt interesting, I was really just shot in the dark, no idea what I was doing. Started chanting, and then some other people in the room joined me, and a bunch of people all of a sudden were chanting in this King's Chamber. And people afterwards told me, like, wow, I was seeing geometric shapes. I had entities visiting me. I had this, I had that. And this was a group of pretty, let's say, materialistic, wonderful people, beautiful people, but just not as, maybe open to these other dimensional frequencies and experiences, yet here they were experiencing those things. So I would love to hear what information do you have about that side of Egypt, where we're talking about
Yeah.
sound and acoustics and things like that.
Okay. Well, in a second, I'll show some slides so we can go into that. But I want to you just said something there about how a lot of these individuals, aren't like within this world that we're in, that they're seeing things and they're not even open to it. Really, they're just like, it's just happening, which kind of shows that maybe there's something there, even if someone's not trying to see it. That reminds me of the Archaeoacoustic Convention that happened in Vancouver in 2012, where all these mainstream archaeologists and acoustic researchers, mainstream, there's an annual conference called the Archaeoacoustics Conference, where they get together to talk about the acoustics of ancient structures. That's what the conference is on, mainstream. So they went all over the world, including Egypt, found a lot of structures that emanated 110 hertz. But one place that it was really interesting for them was the caves in the island of Malta, where in the caves, they were emanating 110 hertz as well, but it was hitting a double octave. And in these caves, they went in them and they found all these bones and they thought it was a tomb, right? Like just like in Egypt. But not to get into this part, but I'll just say really quick. What it actually looks like is that this was an ancient structure that was eventually used as a tomb because of their knowledge of how this structure was a connection to the divine. So they were using it as a place for souls to go into the next world. But what they did there was that they were going there and they were doing some research. And all of a sudden, these regular physicists and archaeologists and acoustic researchers were saying that by being in there, they were, and closing their eyes, they saw their own consciousness projected on the cave art on the wall. And that they felt a sense of inner peace. Some felt that they were floating in space, right? So they got an EEG machine, hooked people up to 110 hertz, mainstream stuff, and exact same thing. Way more like I don't remember all the experiences, but regular people having these type of spiritual experiences. So there's a few questions here. Well, how on earth did they make a structure built out of stone and know that it was going to create these frequencies? And then, secondly, why were they trying to get those frequencies and what were they actually doing when they got to that level of consciousness? Were they communicating with the divine? Were they communicating with the star beings? Was it creating a portal from this dimension to another dimension for their souls after they passed away? But beyond all of that, we're not able to just get a clay thing right now, mold it, and just know how to do it in a way that the wind strikes the structure and creates that frequency. And even if you can't hear the frequency, because if you go in the structure and you chant, it will take your voice, it will convert it to the 110 hertz and put it back to you. And the wind creates a natural 110 hertz that's inaudible 24/7. Right?
How do they know that? I mean, and it's worldwide. You're finding this stuff all over the place. It's not just in this one-off situation, like you're saying. It's everywhere. It's all over the place. And so that to me is like, you have to be really stubborn, I think, to not recognize patterns. We're just being scientific here. These are patterns, and they're the same frequency coming from these things. That's amazing. And for myself, this is inspiring for me. I want to go dig deeper into this 110 hertz phenomenon.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Remember, we might go to Malta together after Egypt.
Yes.
And that's why I want to go there. I want to be so few people have done that research after these guys.
Well, count me in, Neil. And those of you watching and listening, stay tuned to what we're doing this year, because 2023 is going to be a real spectacular one. I'm so excited to see what we come across in Egypt together, and what you're just talking about in Malta. I mean, that's mind blowing. That's just mind blowing to me.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so now we're going to go into sound and harmonics in Egypt. But in this presentation, I always like to say this quote here, because before this slide, I talk about sound in different origin stories. I think we'll have a couple more in here just in a second. But this one right here really says it all, because I have a whole other presentation called the Creation Stories of Ancient Civilizations, where I went through around 300 different origin stories to see if there's similarities. And then I broke them down in categories. The ones that talk about sound and frequency, the one that talk about the Big Bang in different metaphoric terms, the ones that talk about extraterrestrials. And there was one common thread in like 90% of them all. They all talked about sound somehow. So I just want to read this quote because it's so beautiful. And I'm not going to break it down like I usually do, the science behind it. But Chris, I'd love for you to just have that scientific mind as I'm saying this, because this is all metaphors for science. And everybody else listening as well. Here we go. In the center of the universe, she sang. In the midst of the waters, she sang. In the midst of heaven, she sang. In the center, she sang. Her singing made all the worlds of the spirits, the worlds of the people, the worlds of the creatures, the worlds of the gods. In this way, she separated the quarters. Singing, she separated. Upon the face of heaven, she placed her song. Upon the face of water, she placed her song. Thus placed her song. Thus she placed her will. Thus wove she her design. Thus sang the spider. Thus she thought. What are your thoughts, Chris?
That's so powerful. I mean, it's beautifully said. There's so many things that come to my mind. One of the first things is what we see again echoed in the Bible, and this is just such an example of how all of these religions have common threads, and that's what to me is the most interesting about a lot of religions. And it's God said, "Let there be light." So the sound came before the light, came before this third dimensional reality. Sorry?
And the gods, the world of the gods. The sound created the gods.
Right? So they're not even like, they're still a part of this. So and then that goes into like, okay, so who are these gods with the small g, right?
Yeah.
Not the God that created everything, but these are gods that are obviously like, beings with godlike abilities, most likely that we've thrown into that category. But thus saying the spider is really
Mhm.
interesting. The spider creating that web of consciousness that
Exactly.
I've heard about in many other folklore and stories as well about the creation of this universe, the web. Well, that makes me think even about how science looks at a lot of aspects of matter as this web, right?
Mhm.
And even through quantum entanglement, everything is connected at any point in the universe. Once you have the quantum entangled particles and you separate them, they're instantly accessible. And it feels like that I've seen sometimes this depiction of this web that's instantaneously connected throughout the entire universe, this web of consciousness. And the spider is a very, obviously, a very powerful mythological creature too. That seems to
Yes.
coincide with consciousness, which is what is everything if it is not consciousness at the end of it all, right?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And what form is the web? Sacred geometry. A
Good point.
fractalization, the source of the spider web, the center, is basically the center of the universe, the center of the multiverse.
Mm.
And then what does it create outside of it? Fractal, 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 until you get to the ends of the fractal, and now you have thus she thought. Thus
Ah.
she thought was the original intent of source. What if? What else could I be? What is something other than me? You know?
Mm. To expand and experience yourself in different ways, like a blade of grass or a human being or an extraterrestrial. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
We're all
Yep.
just trying to experience our thought. Thus, she thought. That's beautiful.
Hmm. And I'm skipping over this, but just to go deeper into the sound, the Bible, John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, right? And actually, let's talk about this for a second. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. I love talking about the paradox. If I could change my MC name, it would be MC Paradox because I love it. So it goes like how can the Word be with God and the Word be God at the same exact time? It's paradoxical. He was with God in the beginning. Go ahead.
No, I mean, it is paradoxical, but isn't I find a lot of things when we come into consciousness and even quantum mechanics and all these things, it's all paradoxical in a way,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
Keep going. This is great.
Okay. He was with God in the beginning. Who's he? A lot of people mistake this for like Jesus or like, some other God, like or God in general. But he was still talking about the sound. The sound was with God in the beginning. Through him, not talking about Jesus here, we're talking about what we talked about in the first part, sound. Through sound, all things were made. Without the word, nothing was made that has been made. In
Mm.
sound, was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. Whoa, this is a scientific equation from light coming from sound.
There's so much science in these ancient texts, that's where it's like, and I'm glad you said this at the beginning, where you can't, I grew up atheist. So I grew up, not believing in any of this stuff, and religion was all nuts craziness to me. And
Mhm.
then through research and through time and experience, I realized that there's so much that we can actually learn from these ancient scriptures because they hold these nuggets of truth. And that's what we're diving into here. It's just so interesting. I love these parallels.
I know, me too. So we're gonna go a little more here into Egyptian sound possibilities, and I'll show you what I skipped. This is Robert Schoch from my conference in 2018, where he talks about the information we already spoke about in the beginning, the geological studies around the dating of the Sphinx, the Pyramid Code, the documentary on Netflix. Watch it. It talks about the aqueducts below the Sphinx, the copper rods, how electricity is carried into certain chambers in the Sphinx, and then goes out into hollowed out caverns that would actually create sound harmonics because the Nile River was actually located in a different area than it is right now. And when the Nile River would overflow during certain seasons, it would go under the aqueducts, under the pyramids, creating a very acoustic, organic, ancient frequency generating device. Not only was it creating electricity, the electricity was going into these tubes that would eventually become sound harmonics. And now we'll talk here. I want to speak about just what we told about the pyramid and how the pyramids were created in Giza Plateau. So there is a papyrus that's dated to around 2000 BC, and it states that the Pyramid of Giza was created in 20 years. But the pyramid contains 2.3 million individual blocks of stone. meaning one block would have to be laid every 5 minutes of every 20 hour, 24 hours a day for 20 years. But what's the problem with that? Each block weighs at least 2 tons. So
Incredible.
that's 1,764,000 pounds of stone being laid every day for 20 years.
My God.
So, if we look at that, maybe if that was the case, they could have used levitation, or it even goes further back and we just goes back so far back into our history that's the technology that we can get at this point.
Yeah, what if they were 3D printed or something? Like we
Yeah,
literally don't
manifested.
know.
Right,
Manifested
exactly.
out of the ether and brought into reality. What if there were beings that, in ancient India, I know that there are some temples that have a story of a god came over one night and built this temple in one night. And I'm blanking the name on this temple, but it's like one piece of rock that is literally carved out of of a wall of mountain, basically. And in these stories, you're like, okay, if there's truth to the fact of that this was built in a day or 20 years or whatever, small period of time, what kind of tech are they using? Or to get out of our,
Yeah.
Kali Yuga mentality, is it technology or is it abilities of beings that we cannot even fathom?
Right. As Graham Hancock shared in his recent documentary, that there seems to be ample evidence that different cultures went down a different route of technology. And their route went so far from what we have nowadays that we don't even recognize it as technology.
Exactly. At best, we would call it magic.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then also Egyptian language. So when we start seeing written language, in ancient Egypt, when we start seeing the introduction of hieroglyphs, there are actually no vowel hieroglyphs. It's all consonants. And if you go throughout all ancient cultures, it seems like the vowels weren't even implemented into society until later. So that means one of two things: that there were no vowels, or the vowels were not used for a specific reason. And I'm leaning in the middle of that. I think maybe there were some places where vowels weren't used, but it also seems that these vowels were very sacred words that weren't supposed to be written down, that they were only used in spiritual practices and out loud. For example, the Ankh. The Ankh wasn't the Ankh, it was the Nkh, Nkh. Ankh, every one of those represents a deity. A is Amun Ra, N is Nun, K is Kemet, and H is another deity, I forget the name. And A, Amen, represents what is hidden. Therefore, the A was never pronounced because the A, Amen, is hidden. The N plus the K plus the H, all are representatives of water and matter. NKH, water and matter, creates the A, which is the hidden world, which is Amen Ra, which is earth. So it was an equation that basically the A was also hidden. So the symbolism, just like kind of drilling through this, but the symbolism behind even the way they use their language was almost an equation in itself. So we see that the Egyptians, not for thousands of years, had any hieroglyphs that had any vowels introduced in there. And the reason is, I talk about this as well in my other sound presentation, is that each of those vowel sounds actually represents an energetic center in the body, a chakras point. So when we're at a certain level of consciousness, we didn't need the vowel sounds because we were already at that level. And then we were falling into the Treta Yuga, and we were still at a level of telepathy and a few different advancements, and they weren't utilized. When we started falling into even a lower cycle, a lower age, all of a sudden these symbols and these sounds that were ways in order to activate energy centers in our bodies was then implemented in our language to as almost like the last battle against the devolution. It was like, let's see if this will work. Like let's throw everything at it and try to keep a level that high.
And I've heard that that's maybe why some of these pyramids were built, or other temples and places
Exactly.
and devices, just to keep our level of consciousness from those previous Yuga cycles, just to try to slow down this process of de-evolution, which of course, well, here we are today. So you tell me where we're at.
Exactly. When you chant, like, so the vowels A-E-I-O-U, I teach chanting classes and workshops. I'm teaching one at Conscious Life Expo this Sunday. And when you chant the vowels, like you breathe in A-E-I-O-U, it activates different parts of your body. The sound ah, is a very heart chakra sound. You have all throughout Hawaiian language, aloha, it's a very opening, heart welcoming sound. You have Allah, with the ah sound, which is a very hard sound, you see some ancient words that use the ah sound that are really sounds that are supposed to cultivate that hard feeling. You have sounds like E, try chanting E, and you can feel that in your head and your consciousness. It's a frequency that can really help you get into the higher chakras. You have the sound ooh, ooh. You feel that in your gut. It's a really root grounding sound, kind of like a didgeridoo. So these sounds, you know, as I said, were implemented in order for us to be able to reach this level of consciousness. And so yeah, so I just wanted to throw that in there in regards to Egyptian language, but really a language around the whole world. You see that in Sanskrit too. Sanskrit wasn't the ancient Indian language. Sanskrit was actually a specific language only used within spiritual practices in India. There was a common language, and then there was Sanskrit, which was used for all the rites and rituals and spiritual practices. And then we see the chants in there. Om, right? Om Bhur Bhava Swaha Tat Sarvitar Vareniyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi. That's Sanskrit right there. And the sounds, the vowels are really, really emphasized.
It's just so
As I
interesting.
shared,
Keep
know,
going.
right?
It's fascinating.
The greatest story ever told, man. You know, how we got to where we are, you know, and trying to rediscover this stuff. It's like we're detectives of the ancient past.
It's better than any Marvel movie you'll ever see. You know, I'm just telling you right now. And where do you think a
Straight
lot
up.
of these
I mean,
Marvel
Marvel
movies get
movies,
their stories from, right?
that's what I'm saying, dude. Yeah,
Yeah.
they take it. They don't still tell you everything. They tell you what they want to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well,
So, yeah, and the last one here was the aqueducts. Yeah, go ahead.
oh, sorry. So, okay, I was just gonna say I watched the most recent Black Panther film, and the actual antagonist in the film is Kukulkan, like straight up Kukulkan, when the
Right.
Mayan gods, right? I was like, oh my god,
Yeah. Yeah.
they're just going for it now. So,
Right.
you
Well,
know, yeah.
what's that one with Angelina Jolie? That one that came out that the Eternals. The Eternals. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen that one. No.
Oh, dude. The Eternals. It starts in Mesopotamia in 6000 BC with the gods walking around teaching the Sumerians how to do agriculture,
Okay.
and then it fast forwards after basically it starts with actually a UFO coming down to Mesopotamia, and it says Mesopotamia 6000 something, and
Wow.
then it goes into the future and it shows this cult in a few hundred years flourishing and being taught all this technology. Then some things happen, and then it gets into modern times, and these are our superheroes, and they're all different races. One of them's a Bollywood actor, he's the Indian god,
Wow.
and one of them's Gilgamesh.
Oh my god.
Yeah, no, you gotta watch it. That one's
Wait,
next level
what's that one called
exposure.
again?
The Elementals.
The Elementals. It's
Yeah,
happening.
yeah.
Thank you.
So you know, Doctor Strange's assistant, the
Yes.
Asian guy, that's
Yeah.
Gilgamesh.
Really?
Okay, that's yeah. So this is the same storyline. This is just the elementals, a part of the same pantheon of gods, and it shows you the story of Gilgamesh and how he got to the future.
Wow. Okay. Great. More homework
Yeah,
for me.
you gotta watch it, right?
Well, okay. So getting back to Egyptian sound use possibilities here. This is also where I
Yeah.
really feel Egypt is. We're just on this precipice right now of discovering amazing technology that was from this time. And guess what? We mentioned someone earlier. Neil mentioned Nikola Tesla. Well, when he talks about how he built the Wardenclyffe Tower that was generating wireless electricity in the early 1900s, where did he get his design from? The Great Pyramid. So what are we talking about here? Are these pyramids of Giza power plants like Christopher Dunn's theory? What are we looking at here?
Who are you speaking about just now?
Well,
That
I
got
just
his designs for the pyramid.
Nikola Tesla. I heard that he
Okay.
modeled some of his designs of the Wardenclyffe Tower, especially with the way that he built it over an aquifer, excuse me, and used the
Yeah.
running water underneath to power the tower. Um, yeah. Anyway,
So another person, I'm looking him up right now, so I don't butcher his name. Is Vogel. You know Vogel?
yes, I've heard that name.
So he was the guy that helped discover the crystal and the perfect crystal and the dimensions of a crystal in order to create the first computers for IBM,
Okay.
right?
All
And
right.
his crystals were at the same dimensions as the pyramid on Giza Plateau, the same
Oh my God.
dimensions. So actually, the computers and the crystals within it, actually, like 10 years ago, I was deep into this. I knew all the information. 10 years later, I forgot a lot of it.
Yeah, I'm the
So I
same
just know
way.
the
It's all
basics.
good.
Yeah, but look up Vogel crystals, crystal ones, and they're the same dimensions of the pyramid on the Giza Plateau. And then look up Vogel, and he actually worked for IBM, and he discovered that these ratios of the pyramids on the Giza Plateau were the perfect ones to hold data for computers, and that's actually the computers that we use right now. Yeah. So let's get into this part here, this last part of the Egyptian sound. So, experiments conducted by a guy called Tom Danley in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid and in chambers above the King's Chamber suggest that the pyramid was constructed with a sonic purpose. Danley identifies 4 resident frequencies of notes that are enhanced by the structure of the pyramid and by the materials used in its construction. Okay, the materials as well. The notes start from F sharp chord, which according to ancient Egyptian texts was a harmonic replica of Earth. Every sentence here is a whole entire 30-minute conversation.
I know, and I've heard F sharp for me with my musician brain. I heard, and I can't 100% confirm this, but the song that starts the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey by Strauss, that dun 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 dun, that famous song. Believe that's in the key of F sharp specifically for this reason that we're talking about. So
interesting,
very interesting. Love this.
And just this last sentence here. Let's just speak on that for a second. Pyramids, ley lines of Earth, connected on the ley lines on top of it. The energy flow below these pyramids were already really high. Put on these ley lines in order to amplify the energy of the Earth. And then the aqueducts and the water coming through, the natural elements utilized to amplify what was already amplified in that area anyway, then use it as this technology, as this acoustic generating device in order to funnel all that energy into these structures. What was going on here? So, moreover, Danley's tests show these frequencies are present in the King's Chamber even when no sound are being produced. This is what we found all over the world. The islands of Malta, County Meath, Ireland, this structure over there. Everywhere we're finding in Palenque that these sounds are coming, even these inaudibly. They are there in frequencies that range from 16 hertz down to 1/2 hertz, well below the range of human hearing. According to Danley, these vibrations are caused by the wind blowing across the ends of so-called shafts, in the same way sounds are created when one blows across the top of a bottle. These guys are so incredibly genius, right? Let alone everything else we've shared today about them. But they've also used material that they know is going to amplify the frequencies in specific ways. They know where to put the materials in different areas to amplify it. And they've actually created wind shafts positioned perfectly correctly in order for it to have the effect that they want to have it. How did they even see that before they even created it?
And this is great, because, I start to think about a lot of the things that I saw when I was in Egypt, which was like, okay, why on earth are they coring stone in Aswan, which is 1,000 kilometers away from the Giza Plateau, bringing it all the way up the Nile to then build the Great Pyramid? Why in the hell are they doing that? It's so much work. It's well out of their way. It makes no sense from an engineering efficiency perspective. And then I hear similar stories about Stonehenge. The rocks in Stonehenge are not from that area. They're actually from Wales. They're from again hundreds of kilometers away from that original site. Why? And it seems to be the only real logical explanation is exactly what you said. There is something very specific about the property of these stones that has an effect. And we're just scratching the surface of that. So this is amazing. And I think you're going to get into some of these effects right now, it looks like.
Exactly. Well, I'm not going to show this video because it's copyrighted, right? So this is the video that you're asking for, though.
Yes.
So go on Google and type sound uses to levitate stones.
We've actually just did this in a previous podcast, so you guys can check out our episode of that. We have this video there. And of course, yeah, just YouTube it.
Yeah, just do that. And this one I will show. This is Brian Forrester, who I've worked with quite a lot as well. And just to show, let me put the sound on here, just to show the sound harmonics of different structures in Egypt. This is the Red Pyramid.
This is the entrance to the Red Pyramid. We're going down the shaft. I'm And we're going to go into these incredible rooms, which are acoustic chambers. Forget about the idea of tombs, think sound and vibrational technology. So this is actually inside, about 20 feet, more than 100 feet to go. Okay, now we're maybe a third of the way in. And Yusuf, are we on? The dark figure is about to come past me. Okay, maybe halfway down now. And the heat is already starting to pick up in here, as well as the heat generated by anticipation and awe. Okay, so we're at the bottom of the descending passageway. It's got to be 90 degrees Fahrenheit in here right now. And now we're going sideways. Tuned to A. That seems to be the sound that it likes the best. So I've just walked through a short tunnel into the second of the chambers here, and the sides of them taper in with these almost baffle-like stones. And of course it could be actually an acoustic cone filter of some kind. The lighting's pretty terrible, but you can see there is a massive crack in the solid stone. And that's part of the theory, again, that this was an energy generating device, as were some of the others of the pyramids on the Giza Plateau, and that they actually became overloaded at one point, partially exploded, and then shut down. And as hard as it may be imagined to believe, we could be talking about that explosion occurring about 12,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age.
Okay, that's all I'm going to show for that one.
Go up 5.
Unreal.
Yeah, right?
Unbelievable. And I experienced things like that in the Bent Pyramid as well, and of course the King's Chamber, like I mentioned. It's something to experience in real life, and come to Egypt with us in September, everybody. And you really, what is it? John Anthony West had a great way of explaining Egypt. He's like, Egypt is, or a lot of these ancient sites in general, he's like, it's kind of like sex. You can, it's one thing to talk about it. It's one thing to show pictures and video, and it's a whole other to actually experience it. And I was like, gets your attention, but it's a very, very accurate, I'd say, description, because when you're in a room of people chanting like that, it does something that the English language can't really describe, to be honest.
Yes.
So thanks for that, Neil. That was amazing. Wow.
Yeah, let me just say to everybody that you mentioned a couple of times, but yeah, we are going to Egypt in September, and our tour is with JJ and Desiree Hertak, that are really, really not only deeply into the archaeology of Egypt and the ancient history of it, but also deeply into the spirituality and the ascension teachings of it. So we're going to have really balanced, I feel like, analytical and intuitive spiritual approach to everything that's going there, the historical context, but also everything else we shared here, the cycles of time, the level of consciousness, the wisdom that was lost to us, the ancient mystery schools. So this is going to be September 6th to 16th, and EgyptAscensionRetreat.com. That's EgyptAscensionRetreat.com. You can sign up there. And seriously, it's going to be an initiation for us all.
I mean, it was when I went there previously. I know you've been there, and it is an initiation. I don't think anyone can go to Egypt, especially when you go in a group like this. There's just nothing quite like the experience of being there. I just feel like everywhere was so activating for me. I actually, when I went there in 2019, I think I slept about 2-3 hours a night at most. I was so wired. I was wired. I couldn't even sleep. I was so excited and activated. There's something going on there that I absolutely love. So I'm really excited to go back with you, with the group, and learn so much more. Oh, you haven't? Oh, I'm sorry, Neil. I thought you did. Okay. Wow.
No,
oh, buddy, you're in for a treat.
Yeah, no, right? Because I speak about it so much. I know so much about it,
Oh
but I
my
haven't
God.
been. So this is like, I'm excited to be there, man.
Oh, it is just going to be so cool. And on a musical note too, I love to play, like sing, or even bring maybe some instruments or just little things into some of these places. And again, experiment with what frequencies, but also just music in general. Neil's also, again, a musician, rapper, performer. And we'll probably be doing some fun stuff. Who knows, spontaneously there. And I'm just excited to see what happens, because a lot of magic absolutely unfolds from these experiences. And I know you got some other events that I think our listening and watching audience would be really interested in. So you got an online conference as well coming up pretty soon, I believe, right?
So online, yeah, we have our online events, right? And we're waiting for a new website to launch. So then that's where we're going to have a lot of our online events, showcased there. But waiting for it to launch in like a week or two. The only one that's on our current website is the Dolphins and Whales Conference, which is February 19th. So you guys can check that one out. But what we're really focusing on is, our live events. We're focusing on it all, but our live events it's pretty huge for us because it's been 3 years since we've done a live event.
Very true.
And
yeah.
yeah, so San Diego is going to be the return of live events, ascensionconference.com. And that's going to be 3 days in San Diego at the Marina Village right next to SeaWorld. And April 21st, 22nd, 23rd. It's really like next level. Check it out at ascensionconference.com. Linda Moulton Howe, JJ and Desert Hertak will be there too. Robert Schock will be there. Robert Edward Grant's going to be there. And another 20 plus speakers.
Fantastic lineup.
Yeah, amazing musicians, after party, didgeridoo experience, everything, and so that's going to be April. Then we're going to Europe, and we're going to be doing our first conference in England, and that's called Portal to Ascension Glastonbury. So we're going to be in Glastonbury August 11th, 12th, and 13th, and that's ascensionglastonbury.com. So if you guys are on there, then we go to Egypt, the Egypt Ascension Retreat, and at the end of the year, in November 17th, 18th, 19th, we're doing a Crystal Skulls Conference, and that's crystalskullsconference.com. And there's going to be like 20 crystal skulls represented there. A good half of them are the ancient ones. And I feel like we're fulfilling a prophecy with this one, actually.
I get goosebumps thinking about that event, to be honest. I got to be there. I'll figure it out. I got to be there.
Yeah.
Wow. And so, of course, for everyone watching and listening, all of what Neil mentioned will be in the show notes. You guys can check out these links. Of course, most of it is all on the website anyway. And if you might be watching or listening to this in a couple of weeks from now, the new website will already be up and running for Neil with Portal to Ascension. So I think for our podcast today, this feels like a good time to kind of wrap it up. For now, I think I know I'm going to have Neil back on the show again at a later date to go into so many other topics that we just glossed over today. But before we do conclude things, Neil, I would love if you have any parting words for the audience from what we talked about today. And of course, what I find, at least with my journey with all this ancient history and rediscovering our history and the untold story of humanity, for me, it is an enlightening experience. It's expanded my consciousness, my awareness, and it's also healed and helped me in so many ways. So, if you want to leave our audience with some words here in conclusion, go for it.
Yeah, what you just said, the untold story of humanity, that just resonates in my soul. Just hearing that, and we've gone through so many cycles of forgetting and remembering, and that in itself is beautiful. The darkness is no much better or worse than the light. We are going through these cycles and gaining the remembrance because of the darkness that we experienced. But I feel that why it's so important now, maybe than any other cycle, to reclaim our ancient history is so that we can continue our evolution and really create some amazing things in the galaxy and the universe. I feel it's our destiny to travel out into the stars and to teach others how we transcended the darkness and got full remembrance back. The ability that we have to live in harmony and peace and love and unity and feel deep connection to each other and our planet is unprecedented. We have normalized so many things that create disconnections that we just take it for granted that this is just the way the world is. And because everybody else is in this world and reality too, we don't really have anything else to compare it to. But the level of what we can really create with not only just understanding our ancient history, but doing the work so that we can get to a place that we can inherit this awareness and information, I feel that is what's about to happen. And we're really at that age right now. You might see chaos and confusion and all these things around the world, but that's because we just shifted out of an age where we're basically trying to hold on to all that awareness. So if I have any words, it's let go of the old system and make way for the new paradigm. That's what we really need to do, is make way for what is to come, because it's inevitable. The cycles of time show it. We're in an upturning consciousness. We're not falling. It might look like we're falling, but that's just because all these unresolved traumas of the world are coming out to be resolved, right? What used to take us lifetimes to experience over and over, we're getting experiences every single day because we're trying to clear it. So as that's happening, all these things are coming up, giving us an opportunity to transcend and to reclaim parts of our soul, right? And so I'm hopeful for where we're heading, and I'm also having a lot of fun doing it at the same time, because, as you said, it's the greatest story. It's the greatest story never told, man. Like, this is just like so interesting. Who are we? How did we get here? Our history goes off planet. We talk mostly about this planet, right? Imagine what happened before we even got here. What else have we experienced? All of these are golden nuggets that are yet to be uncovered and unveiled to all of us.
Oh, well, so well said, Neil. Thank you very much for sharing all that. And yeah, I echo everything you said. It really brings it all together into who we are today and why we need to connect with one another and come together and explore and expand this idea of who we are, where we come from. Because ultimately, when we start to have a comparison as to who we once were, we realized that life was very, very different than what it is today. And it doesn't have to be the way it is today. We can live far more harmoniously with ourselves and, of course, in nature, with our planet and the cosmos and all the other beings with us. So thank you so much for your presentation, for sharing all your wealth of knowledge. I know we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg with you. For those of you watching and listening, thank you for tuning in. Thank you very much, as always. And if you want to join the Ancient Mysteries Unearthed community membership, it's $9.99 a month, $9.99 a month, to join a group of people like myself and other curious minds, where we can connect with each other, message each other, exchange information, research, and share our research with each other. Of course, we'll be having some private events and webinars where we might get somebody like Neil Gaur to come back on and give us some private presentations or things like that. But for $9.99 a month, you guys can join the community. Please take a look at the show notes for more information there. And otherwise, please stay curious, stay kind, and make sure you check out our next episode of Ancient Mysteries Unearthed. Until next time.